Welcome to One Work, Five Questions with Donna Vitek, that is I, and Dr. Holowchak, that is he.
I'm here as
Yes.
usual.
Thank you for joining us today, Dr. Holowchak.
Glad to be here as usual.
Yes. So today, with our show, One Work, Five Questions, I'll be asking Dr. Holowchak 5 questions on one work of Thomas Jefferson's. And today we have query 4 and query 5 from the notes on the state of Virginia. But before we get started, you know what comes next? What comes first, actually?
I don't have a clue. I haven't been doing this long enough.
And what is this? Is this the 49th episode of our show?
49. You got to do something special for the next time.
Oh, the 50th. Oh, wow.
The 50th.
Yeah.
That's some. There's a rumor that that's half of 100.
Oh, a rumor. Yeah. Well, who knows? It
Yeah.
could get, everything's changing these days, so you never know. It may not be half of 100 before we know it. So before we get started, though, I would like to give you the credentials of Dr. Holowchak. He's a PhD professor of philosophy and history. He's taught at institutions such as University of Pittsburgh, University of Michigan, Rutgers University, Camden, and Ohio University. He's the editor of Thomas Jefferson and His Time, and he has authored and edited over 23 published books on Thomas Jefferson.
25.
25. Wow.
Yes.
And I hear that's a quarter of 100.
That is. And he's also a gardener whose beautiful white hydrangea got molested by deer last night. And
oh, you're kidding. All that beautiful work.
Angst. Cause for angst.
Oh, no. So it looks so beautiful. Those pictures you sent, the garden was so pretty. Oh, wow. Okay.
Viewers did not know that I'm a pretty good gardener. Yeah, I do a lot of gardening outside, a lot of flowers, a lot of 3 peach trees, an apple tree, and so forth. Leave it at that, though.
You're just a modern day Jefferson, aren't you? You have your hands.
I'm not trying to be Jefferson. I'm just trying to be who I am. I just like to garden, so we have that in common. I don't have any people that I can discharge or give directions to whom I can give directions for gardening. I have to do it myself.
Yeah.
That's the only problem.
Oh, and Dr. Holowchak has also authored over 200 essays on Thomas Jefferson, and you'll be able to find a list of his essays and books in the description of the video. And those of you who are listening in on Spaces on Twitter, we are live right now on Spaces and Twitter. You'll be able to find everything in the video that'll be posted on YouTube as soon as we're finished. Okay, so, and which episode is this? This is our 49th, we said, right? So 49. The next one is going to be 50. Okay, wonderful.
And while you're blabbing there, I'm checking my dog for ticks. I got 3 off him yesterday.
Okay, well, I'll keep blabbing and give everybody the introduction to our topic today. Last week, we promised to do something on Jefferson's notion of the aesthetic sense, which is taste, and what Dr. Holowchak calls Jefferson's epistemology of the sublime. Dr. Holowchak directed me to queries 4 and 5 of Thomas Jefferson's notes on Virginia. Not the whole of those queries, but 2 specific passages, Mountains in query 4, where he talks about Harper's Ferry, and Cascades, query 5, where Thomas Jefferson talks about Natural Bridge. So today we shall talk about Jefferson's concept of beauty and sublimity, as well as the aesthetic sense. Ooh, very nice.
Something different. I hope listeners or viewers are going to enjoy it.
He's into so many different things. It's so neat the way we're able to move around into so many different topics with Thomas Jefferson.
And that's what this show is about. It's not just talking about his political ideology. It's about talking about the whole person. That's what interests me. If I had to focus narrowly on his political philosophy, I would be frankly bored.
Oh,
but there's so much. There's so much dimensionality to the person that I fail to get bored. Like I said, he and I shared gardening, and and love of architecture, though I'm no architect. My dad was before he passed away. Anyways, let's get back to the show, right?
Wow. So yeah, it's so funny. Yeah, I would, and I'm the opposite. I would love to just focus on his political sense and how he built the nation. That's my big interest. Is his
Well, as I
profession.
said before, if you were to do that, like other Jefferson writers do, you won't understand the man.
Yeah,
Because
yeah,
unless you understand the breadth and the depth of his interests, you can't understand his political philosophy. So much goes into it. So
right,
that's rationale for doing it my way, really is.
right. And you are correct, because we're not pieces of something. We're pieces of a lot of different things put together in one whole.
He
So
certainly is, yeah.
that makes sense. Okay, are you ready for question number one,
I
Dr.
am ready for question number one.
Okay. Before turning to the relevant passage, can you tell readers about Thomas Jefferson's aesthetic sense, his sense of taste?
Well, he believed that all of us have an intellect, which he, thought was the brain. He was a complete materialist, but we also have a sense of morality, which we haven't talked about before, and that's something we'll have to talk about because that's so important to Jefferson. It's a way of feeling our way through moral problems in everyday life. And then we have a sense of beauty and sublimity, which we're going to talk about more today. This is also a separate faculty, right? And probably he thinks he never expounds on the morals of the aesthetic sense that much, except in one letter. And, so we have to sort of piece it together by reading other people that he read on the aesthetic sense, on feeling. Lord Kames, William Hogarth, Edmund Burke, and so forth. And I've done that. I've read their books, and they do shed light. William Hogarth, for example, talked about beauty being in a serpentine figure.
Okay.
So when you look at beautiful works of art, there's always a sort of a snake-like, what makes them beautiful is a sort of a snake-like, movement, flowing hair, or curvature in a figure or posture. A woman talks about dancing. And so all of these people talk about beauty and sublimity. This was a time when people were really, for the first time, fully addressing what beauty is philosophically or critically as scholars. And so Jefferson thinks we have this sense. He doesn't link it to any faculty. The moral sense, he says, and he's probably not playful here, is linked with the heart, the human heart, just like the intellection is linked with the brain. Mm-hmm. So we have a sense of feeling our way through things that are beautiful and sublime. And as we go through queries 4 and 5, we'll sort of ferret out what he means by that.
Okay, wonderful. Oh, I can't wait. This is exciting. Every week there's something new I'm learning, even after a year. I'm still learning about Thomas Jefferson.
Well, that's the excitement of Thomas Jefferson. I'll say quickly, I'm writing a book on Jefferson's Native American policy, and it's fascinating me because here I have material for condemnation for the first time of Jefferson and this policy. And we'll talk about this later on. But, people say, how can you write 25 books on Jefferson? I can write 25 more.
Yeah.
If I wanted to write a book on Jefferson's and science and Jefferson and so many architecture, I'm not perfectly qualified for that. But I mean, if the guy had so much on his plate, it's easy to write 50 books on him if you want to do the work, and I enjoy doing the work. So,
and you enjoy the work, and you're very good at it.
Yeah,
so, there's no better person. Question number 2: what is the difference between something beautiful and something sublime?
Well, again, if we go to the literature of his day, and even in Jefferson, we'll see when we get to the queries. Your questions 3 and 4 go to the queries, so I won't talk about them right now. Beauty is just something you feel and it moves you in a particular way. You're attracted to it. There's an engagement there. Sublimity puts you in awe, and awe is not necessarily something positive. There's a sense of fearfulness. There's a sense of dread. There's a sense of it moves, it floors me, but it also scares me. Walking into a enormous Gothic cathedral, for example, like look at Notre Dame. You walk inside, it's dark, it's dreary, it's awe-imposing in some sense. You're awed just by walking in there. And that's, of course, the architects of the time wanted to, this is where God lives in some sense, right? So the story goes. And so you're supposed to feel a sense of awe because, God is a sort of concept that would inspire awe. So that, in a sense, without going into the queries themselves, is the difference. Certain beauty is something that's more feminine, that is attractive, that doesn't frighten you away. A rose, my hydrangea, which the deer molested. They didn't eat the beautiful flowers, though. They did eat my rose petals, those bastards. I love deer, but I'm reconsidering that right now. I'm not a hunter, but I wish I had a 500-pound dog that would scare them away. Anyways, but flowers and things, tenderness, a woman is a beautiful thing. The awful, we're going to get when we talk about things that frighten you, that the Grand Canyon, right? The Natural Bridge, which we'll talk about shortly. Those are the sort of things you stand by and you're somewhat afraid in a weird sense. You're sort of taken aback.
Yeah.
But it's a feeling.
Okay. Yeah, I was going to say, well, that could also include just the human emotion of love too. But sounds like that would have fit in that category. Okay, so question number 3. So for query 4 and Harper's Ferry, and hold on, and I will get this picture pulled up for the audience to see. Harper's Ferry, is that what?
Right. Yes.
Okay. So
confluence of 2 rivers here.
Okay, so question number 3. For query 4 and Harper's Ferry, where the Shenandoah River meets the Potomac River, Jefferson's prose here atypically elegant and emotional filled. Why is that?
To go to query 4, it's called Mountains, but Jefferson, a lot of people have written on this, and in my recent book on Jefferson, trying to get it up here, we're focusing on Jefferson taste in the fine arts. I talk about the aesthetic sense, and I talk about the mistakes other people, they talk about how Jefferson's notes on the state of Virginia. Jefferson does so many different things. And then when he lapses into the sort of what I call epistemology of sublime, they say he starts writing emotionally because he's trying to sell readers to come to Virginia. Harper's Ferry is in West Virginia. None of that's true as far as I'm concerned. It's a matter because when he's describing these events, he's following what he feels from his aesthetic sense.
Okay.
It's just like watching the Moses of Michelangelo or something. You look at that and you have a feeling. You let yourself go, and he's trying to capture that. Let me read what he says. It's somewhat elaborate here, but it's worth. He says, the passage of the Potomac through the Blue Ridge is perhaps one of the most stupendous scenes in nature. You stand on a very high point of land. On your right comes up the Shenandoah, having ranged along the foot of the mountain 100 miles to seek a vent. On your left approaches the Potomac in quest of a passage also. In the moment of their junction, where they come together, we don't see it so much in this picture, they rush together against the mountain, render it asunder, and pass off to the sea. So there's a sort of violent collision that the 2 rivers have, where as they come in, and they are actually, their waters, thrust against the mountain and cause it to fall apart in some sense over time. Now, this is what's critical here of beauty and sublimity. He goes, the first glance of the scene hurries the senses into the opinion that this earth has been created in time, that the mountains were formed first, that the rivers began to flow afterwards, that in this place particularly they have been dammed up by the Blue Ridge of mountains and have formed an ocean which filled the whole valley, that continuing to rise they have at length broken over at the spot They have torn the mountain down from its summit to its base, the piles of rock on each hand, but particularly the Shenandoah, the evident marks of their disrupture and avulsion from their beds by the most powerful agents of nature, corroborate the impression. So the first glance, no one's ever talked about this, as I have in several publications. This is the sublime.
Okay.
When you initially approach something like that is powerful, for example, in nature, or man-made like a Gothic cathedral, you get pushed back almost, right? It's powerful, it's awe-inspiring, it's fearful, it draws you away from it, right? He says this is the first glance. Then he says, but the distant finishing which nature has given to the picture is of a very different character. Now listen carefully. It is a true contrast to the foreground. It is as placid, calm, and delightful as that is wild and tremendous. That pointing back to the first impression. It's wild, tremendous. This is calm and placid and so forth, right? And delightful. For the mountain being clover asunder, she presents to your eye through the cleft a small catch of smooth blue horizon at an infinite distance in the plain country, inviting you, as it were, from the riot and tumult of the first impression, right? Roaring around to pass through the breach and participate in the calm below. So if you bring the other picture up again,
okay.
Go back to that picture. I don't know if they will show anything. I couldn't find a good picture.
Oh, this one on Harper's Ferry? Okay.
Yeah, Harper's Ferry.
Okay.
Jefferson says there is a passage somewhere between the tumult that invites you, right? She presents to your eye through the cleft a smooth catch of smooth blue horizon, right? At an infinite distance in the plain country. So somewhere, if you stand in the right spot, you'll look and you'll see, you go beyond what is frightful to see something that is completely delightful. He says the eye ultimately composes itself in that way too. The road happens actually to lead, all right? And he talks about that and so forth. So the idea here is we begin, he says, the first glance. And why other people haven't made anything of this is beyond me. That the initial impression I have is fearful, right? When I catch myself, as it were, and it pushes me back. When I catch myself and go beyond, I see that the whole thing is actually sort of inviting, not fearful.
Mhm.
I compose myself and go beyond the violence of the sublime and see something that draws me in that's actually quite beautiful, right? So that's the notion here, is we have two different impressions. And notice there is a temporal sequence here. When I get in charge of something, something that is violent necessarily, if I compose myself and catch myself, there's great beauty to be found in it. Now, the person whose name escapes me right now, but one of the persons who wrote on first book on criticism as it relates to writing and so forth, whose name will come to me. But he argued that sublimity, or the feelings we have of sublime, are biological. Well, this whole process for Jefferson is biological because he's a complete physicalist. So it's a physical thing that we're going through, even though we're talking about feelings here. Feelings have physical causes.
Right.
But his mentor here, not Hogarth, but was talking about how primitive people, Native Americans, African Americans from the continent, tribal peoples, will necessarily be in awe of many things. Many things will cause them fear. And he argued that as we acclimate ourselves to these conditions, we get away from the fearful and we become less fearful and we see things that are beautiful.
Right.
So if that's correct, what Jefferson is hinting at is that the feeling of awe can actually go away if we get used to, if we acclimate ourselves not to be afraid of certain things to some extent. As we mature as organisms, that we're going to be less fearful and see less sublimity and more beauty.
Right.
We're going to be drawn toward things and not pushed away from them.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I'm trying to apply that to several things in my past, and I can see how that would work. Very good. Okay. Question number 4. Let's turn now to query 5. Does Jefferson add anything to our apprehension of the beautiful and the sublime that is worth mentioning?
Well, let's go to his articulation of the natural bridge, and you've got a very nice picture I see
Of the
up
natural
there
bridge.
on the natural bridge.
Oh, I'd like to pause for a second. One second, Dr. Holowchak. I'd like to, we have a listener, MC Doge, is joining us from Twitter Spaces right now. Hi, I just want to give him a shout out. Hi, MC, thank you for coming. Okay, and I'm sure he's probably familiar with Natural Bridge. And
well, anybody who lives around where I live in Virginia has gone to see the natural bridge, and Jefferson thought it one of the great wonders of the world.
I guess I'm going to need to make a road trip to Virginia, huh?
Well, I've seen it. I mean, it's certainly and I have a book coming out on the natural bridge. Yeah, and Jefferson, of course, would say that because he owned it from 1774 till his death.
Oh,
so I do, as you know, he owned it. He owned the property. We'll talk about that when my book comes out. It's coming out sometime this year. It's been accepted, but the publisher, it's a different publisher. They're a bit backlogged. But I talk about his ownership, and his interest in the natural bridge, by the way, was preservative. He was really someone who's trying to preserve it because there was a lot of mineral deposits near it and around it. And people were, looking for those deposits to make gunpowder and things like that. And he didn't want to see it destroyed. So he was paying taxes on something that was highly inaccessible, highly sublime, right?
Right.
But to go back to his notion of the natural bridge, let me read some of the passages here. The natural bridge, he says, the most sublime of nature's works, right? And I invite you to take that, as I say, cum grano salis, with a grain of salt. There's your term for the day. Cum grano salis, with the grain of salt.
Okay.
You gotta trill your R. Grano. Right. Most people with R's always trill. We in English do not trill for some reason, unfortunately. But he says it's the most sublime of nature's works, though not comprehended under the present head, must not be pretermitted. Okay, it is on the ascent of a hill. If you put that back, you talk about you can access it from the top. You climb to the top. There's a road that goes over it now, which seems to have been cloven through its length by some great convulsion. It was actually caused by a river. This fissure just at the bridge is, by some ad measurements, 270 feet deep, by others only 205. It is about 45 feet wide at the bottom and 90 feet at the top. Notice again how he's got to arithmetize everything to understand it. He's got to measure the damn thing. It's not enough that he just says, hey, this is beautiful or sublime. No, I, Thomas Jefferson, have to measure it. Other people haven't. Right? Yeah. And this, of course, determines the length of the bridge, its height from the water. Its breadth in the middle is about 60 feet, but more at the ends. So he's talking about the middle, across 60 feet.
Okay.
The residue with the hill on both sides is one solid rock of limestone. The arch approaches the semi-elliptical form at the top. You see the semi-ellipsis. But the larger axis of the ellipsis, which would be the chord of the arch, is many times longer than the semi-axis, which gives it its height, right? All right, here's the important part. Now he's done measuring and arithmetizing. He says, though the sides of this bridge are provided in some parts with a parapet of fixed rocks, yet few men have resolution to walk them over and look. So in other words, walk on top of the bridge and look down from the top. He says,
no, thank you.
He says, you involuntarily fall on your hands and feet, creep to the parapet, and peek over it. Now, looking down from this height, about a minute gave me a violent headache. So you notice the sublime. When you are on top of it looking down, you are scared shitless. He says this painful sensation is relieved by a short but pleasing view of the Blue Ridge along the fissure downwards, upwards by that of the short hills, which by the Purgatory Mount is a divergence from the North Ridge, and descending then to the valley below, the sensation becomes delightful in the extreme. You get away from the edge, look around you, and you see that you're surrounded by beauty. Once you catch yourself, right? There's a sense in which the sublime just overwhelms you. You don't think about it. You don't say, hey, this is dangerous, I'm scared. You're just scared, right? Once you compose yourself and you look around, he says, it is impossible for the emotions arising from the sublime to be felt beyond what they are here. So beautiful in art, so elevated, so light, and springing, as it were, up to the heaven, the rapture of the spectator is really indescribable. The fissure continues deep and narrow, and following the margin of the stream upwards about 3/8 of a mile, you arrive at a limestone cavern, less remarkable for its height and so forth, right? So that's it. But I mean, the idea is it's just, he talks about this. He's on top, he looks down, he gets a massive, and he had headaches whenever he was really tense. He gets a headache, pulls himself away from the edge and catches himself where he knows he's safe, he's not going to fall over. And he looks around and the Blue Ridge Mountains and sees Purgatory Mountain and looks, and everything is really calm and beautiful.
Yeah.
So the sublime is that first glance impression that overwhelms you, that pushes you back. And once you compose yourself, you are drawn. So sublime throws you away, beauty draws you in. Okay. There are a lot of writers, as I said, William Hogarth, Edmund Burke especially, uses that sort of language of calm, placidity, calmness, placidity, loveliness, pulchritude with beauty, whereas sublime is awe, fear, pushing you away, large, massive, unfathomable, right? The conception that many people have of God as is infinite in all sorts of capacities is sublime. It's meant to instill fear because you can't understand what it means to have infinite powers. We are finite beings. So that's why, in many sense, you see these Gothic cathedrals, they're just cathedrals designed to inspire awe, because you're going to have a building for a being with infinite powers. It has to be a building that inspires feelings of sublimity.
That makes sense now when looking at architecture.
Well, think about that when you approach architecture. If you look at my Facebook posts on Mark Holowchak, I have a lot of architecture. I have a lot of, I love architecture on there, and I do some art and stuff. I have a lot of posts that just show nature, but you see the sublime and beauty in nature all the time.
Would you mind putting the same things you post on Facebook on Twitter for those that don't have Facebook, like me? I don't.
Well, you will have to tell me how to do that as usual, because I am technically challenged. I am challenged in a lot of intellectual ways, but technically, especially when it comes. I mean, I'm proud of myself for knowing how to do Facebook. The cell phone. You and other people are saying you haven't uploaded such and such on your cell phone. My answer is my cell phone is for making and receiving telephone calls, just like a landline. Anything else I do not do.
Do I have to drive to Virginia and install Twitter for you?
Someone might, I don't know. It's a scary thing for me, right? See, if I do all that stuff, it takes my time, and I can't be reading and writing on Thomas Jefferson, which I think I'm really good at, by the way. And I can give, and I do, and I'll say this boldly, and it's sincerely, I can give readers insight to things that Jefferson wrote that no one in the world can give them. No one in the world talked of this epistemology of sublime. No one. And I say that, I call it epistemology sublime because it deals with a sense of knowing. Epistemology is an account of how we know things, but it's a matter of knowing something to be beautiful or sublime through feeling it.
Right.
And what I mean by epistemology of sublime is that, in a sense, we we can, as we mature, it suggests that there might even be a sense of maturation when we no longer see sublime anymore. We never feel the sublime. All we feel, notice how he says, when you get used to everything, get rid of the first impression. Imagine if I never have that first impression, that everything I see is just beautiful. I suspect that's never going to happen because of the biological makeup of humans. It would be impossible to stand atop the natural bridge, get to the corner of it or the edge of it and look down and not be afraid because of the risk of falling.
Right.
Hitting the ground. Here's an hypothesis for you. I suspect hitting the ground, if you fell, might hurt.
Yeah.
You might really regret it.
Yeah.
All right.
Okay. Are you ready for
stuff, isn't it?
It really is. It's I haven't looked at it in this manner before. We have about 7 minutes left. We have one more question. Finally, you mentioned that for Thomas Jefferson, humans had intellection, a moral sense, and aesthetic sense. How did these three faculties function if independent were their tensions?
Well, when we talk about the moral sense and intellect, they're all three independent faculties. He's very clear on that. How they interact, if you look at Lord Kames, The Elements of Criticism, Kames talks about how the aesthetic sense and morality are lined up, and Jefferson agrees with that. Even though they're independent, they still do, in some sense, collude or work together, as it were.
Okay.
Because I see Jefferson is clear, as well as Kames, Henry Home, that, you know, when I see someone performing a moral act, right, someone helping someone who is in need of some help, you know, the old thing, helping a little old lady walk across a crowded street.
Yeah.
Otherwise, she might get hit by a car. Helping the little old lady, you know, cross the natural bridge so she doesn't fall off of one of the sides, right? Or a little old man, as it were, or a little old, or a big old Holowchak helping him cross.
I was just gonna say, or helping the old man.
The old man get across. Yeah, and I do need help. But the idea is that it's not just a good thing, but what do you feel? You feel a sense that you feel a sense of goodness. And when something evil is done, someone comes and robs the purse from the little old lady instead of helps her cross, you feel a sense of repulsion. Notice goodness draws you to, repulsion pulls you away.
Yeah.
Something we got from the Stoics, complete physicalists when it came to morality. But when we also see someone doing a good act, we feel warm. We understand it's a beautiful thing. And likely, the repulsive act of doing something bad is something that is ugly. So beauty, the moral faculty and the aesthetic faculty, in some measure, work together. Can work together. We can be inspired to perform morally appropriate actions from a sense of beauty. Right? I can be incentivized to want to do that because of a sense of beauty. Cum grano salis. That has no bearing here, but I want to throw that in because that's our term for the day. We need a term for the day.
What was that?
Grano salis. With a grain of salt. Take it with a grain of salt.
Grano salis.
Cum grano salis.
Oh. Well, thank you so much, Dr. Holowchak, for your time. And if you'd like to contact Dr. Holowchak to speak at an event, you can reach him at mholowchak@hotmail.com and Twitter at Dr. Holowchak. And he's going to start using his Twitter account more, right?
If you force me.
I'll coerce you. Okay. And his Facebook page is Thomas Jefferson, Bring Him Home to Monticello, Citizens for Change. You can reach him there as well. And our next episode is going to be our 50th episode. So did you pick something very special for our 50th episode?
I did. I picked provisionally a letter to Dr. John Manners on Jefferson and biotic classification. Now, I say that let's take that cum grano salis, because, maybe we should try to do something a little more uplifting, something that has with it an element of beauty and sublimity in it for the 50th one. I don't know. We can do that. We'll discuss that. But for the time being, we're going to talk about Jefferson and biotic classification, if that is agreeable.
Okay.
I will discuss with you. Maybe you want to do something different, and that's certainly a possibility.
Oh no, biotic classification is fine. I enjoy learning, because I know I'll get my chance on July 4th to do the topic I love the most. So,
which is
the Declaration of Independence.
The person to whom I was referring always came to mind, Hugh Blair. He wrote a book called Lectures on Rhetoric and Bell Letters. And that was, he talked about how there might be an evolutionary role for feelings of sublimity. And Jefferson loved this book. He certainly was probably aware of that. He read that, I'm sure. And my point is that he probably got this whole notion of the first glance and then distant finishing from Hugh Blair and his Lectures on Rhetoric and Bell Letters. So Hugh Blair. Hugh Blair.
Okay, Hugh Blair. And then I wanted to get the correct spelling. Lord Kames, did you say earlier?
Kames.
Kames. Okay.
Or as Jefferson would spell it, Kaims.
Oh.
Why he never got the spelling right most of the time, I don't know. But that's Thomas Jefferson.
Well, because forget it. I was going to make a joke. I'll save it.
Probably at my expense, huh?
No, it wasn't.
The thing I've learned, Thomas Jefferson never grew a mustachio or a beard, and I'm learning that if you don't trim or shave this, it gets longer.
It looks good. I like it.
First time I've had a beard of this length, it was prompted by someone telling me to grow a beard. So I said, "What the heck? I'll grow one and see what happens."
It looks good. It makes you look younger.
Oh, it sure as heck doesn't. If I shaved this, I'd look 10 years younger. That much I know. Without appealing to anybody else, I can shave it tomorrow and everybody would say, "You look 10 years younger." Hey, I don't worry about stuff like that.
Okay, well, thank you so much for your time. And we have Live UK is joining us on Twitter Spaces right now, also with MC Doge, and I'd like to thank them for sitting through our episode. If they're still doing okay listening to all of this.
Well, we also have Jefferson sitting on a chair to my left, and my cat Sigmund, named after Sigmund Freud, in whom I had tremendous interest decades ago, not so long ago, maybe 10 years ago. I studied Freud for about 30 years and wrote 5 books on him till I got sort of bored. Jefferson doesn't bore me, by the way. Freud did at some point.
Yeah, he's such a cutie pie. I love him. The video will be uploaded to YouTube. Well, not right after we're finished, because we're going to do another episode talking about the first book you ever